Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Jason Gaines, Cobb Community Development. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the Johnson Ferry and Shallowford Master Plan. In 2018, at the request of Commissioner Ott and several community members, staff engaged the community concerning the Johnson Ferry Shallowford planning effort, otherwise known as JOSH for short. This effort was led by the Planning Division of Community Development with support from staff from Cobb Parks, Cobb County Water System, and Cobb DOT. This morning, I just want to take a few minutes to give you a brief overview of the plan, the process, and the resulting recommendations. And following the presentation, I'll be available for questions, and we're asking that you all adopt the recommendations from the plan. Next slide. Okay, all right, so purpose of the plan, 4 basic points. To create a redevelopment strategy focused primarily on the commercial node around the area of Johnson Ferry and Shallowford roads. I also want to talk a little bit about preservation, and I'll talk more about that later, but we're understanding that this area in general is primarily established single-family residential neighborhoods. So we're looking to preserve those while at the same time provide some redevelopment opportunities and policies associated with that commercial node. Policy guidance that would be supplementary to the comprehensive plan, a sense of community pride, identity, sense of place, to establish a more unified community, so to speak, and just overall quality of life for residents and business owners within the study area. Okay, so like our comprehensive plan, we've got elements associated with JOSH, and unlike the comprehensive plan, which has roughly 12 or so elements, we've got 5 core elements regarding the JOSH plan, which you see there on the screen before you. Process breaks down into the same basic 3 steps as our comprehensive planning process, with a heavy emphasis on community engagement, and you'll hear me talk about that a lot throughout the presentation today. Okay. Here's a map of our study area with an inset to show its location in the northeast corner of Cobb County, bounded by Fulton County on the east, about maybe a half mile or so south of Post Oak Strip Road to the south, going all the way up to the north along Sandy Plains Road, just shy of the intersection of Sandy Plains and Highway 92. Wesley Chapel Road forms a good portion of the western boundary of the study area as well. And I just want to say that the study area was smaller originally when we scoped this out, but through community input, we expanded the study area to include more of these established residential communities. So yes, community engagement, the core of all planning processes. We initially started this in 2018, as I mentioned previously, and we conducted 3 public meetings in the spring of 2018, which included, as one of the main exercises, an image preference survey, which uses different imagery from different places to show size, scale, landscaping, architectural design, building mass, things of that sort, just to kind of gauge people's feelings on what a redevelopment scenario could look like. There were some concerns about what was contained in that initial study, so we paused, we regrouped, and we reworked the image preference survey, and then came back to the public with 3 more meetings in the winter of 2019. Which was very satisfying to those who were engaged with us through the community engagement process. So that part of it was successful. It got the results that we were looking for as staff in order to build a plan, as well as kind of assuage the fears, so to speak, that some of the community members had about what was contained in that initial image preference survey. Virtual engagement, even prior to COVID-19, was a big deal for us with this project, as well as it was the first time that we used GIS mapping to create a website where people could use maps to identify areas within the study area and send us pictures, notes, comments, any little thing that they might want to show us that we could do without actually setting foot on someone's property or in a creek or something of that sort. So that was a big deal for us as well. Okay, so here's our plan framework. You've got a vision and guiding principles, and I won't read those, but that is the core of this plan, and that was derived directly from public engagement. We had several exercises where people would just write one word about how they felt about certain aspects of the planning process, really based on the elements, and this was the result of that. So again, community-driven, community-purposed. Okay. So now let's get a little bit into the recommendations. As I mentioned before, preservation was a big piece of this as well in conjunction with redevelopment. So when you look at these, from the land use perspective, these two character areas, suburban residential and commercial transitional. Commercial transitional is your redevelopment focused. Again, you see that large area along Johnson Ferry Road, bounded at the north by Shallowford. That's our primary area, and we'll take a deep dive into that in a minute. We also have one of those areas a little bit west along Shallowford near the intersection of Lassiter Road, where there are some, there's a small pocket of community, commercial uses as well. But again, the vast majority of our study area is established, well-maintained, single-family residential neighborhoods. And we just wanted to emphasize that that character area is intended to be preserved and not have any substantial changes proposed through this project or through the comprehensive plan. Okay, so now let's dive deep into the Johnson Ferry Shallowford node. We've got two proposed future land use map amendments identified by areas 2 and 3 along the western side of Johnson Ferry Road there. Then you see the focal points for those proposed land use changes, as well as small area policy guidelines that we've proposed for this. And those would be created as part of our 2021 comprehensive plan update that we do every year in January. But of course, we've got January 2021 coming up, so that's why I mentioned that specifically. One point that I do want to bring, and this was asked, I believe, during the work session, about the Planning Commission's recommendation. And their recommendation was to remove what was shown on the previous map as Area 3, and I'll go back real quick so you can see it and make that connection. So the Planning Commission's recommendation was to remove Area 3, and that was based primarily on a concern raised by the property owner there and their legal representation. So that was the main driver for that recommendation from the Planning Commission.
What is that area?
That is that's the lake that was previously drained as part of the Maddox property.
Okay, that comes up to Waterford?
Yes.
Waterfront, okay.
I believe it is Waterford, but yes.
So is it just the green part?
Yes, the green part, this labeled Area 3, is what the Planning Commission recommend removal of.
And Commissioner Burrell, some of that was, no. Some of that was based on, and I don't know if Jason's going to cover it, but I'll cover it, conceptual plans that are in the master plan. Mm-hmm. And those are conceptual only. They're not requirements. They were just kind of more illustrative than anything else. And so the whole discussion about 3, because right now the lake isn't there, it's been drained. So the whole idea of creating a lake feature, there is no lake. And what got hung up on was the fact that there was an illustrative conceptual plan that showed a lake. There's also one that shows like a creek. There's one that shows a trail. But they were simply illustrative to show what could potentially go there, but by no means indicative of what had to go there. And so that's where the confusion comes from. I think the intent of the community was to at least address the fact that there is a creek there, there was a lake there, and that any plan coming forward would kind of take a look at some sort of feature to not just build over it. Would you, that's pretty much what the community thought.
That is an excellent representation of that, yes, sir.
And on page 39 of the book, of the proposal.
That's where the conceptual plan is.
It's got a trail and community park. I mean.
But that's one of the conceptual plans we're talking about that was purely illustrative as potential uses. It's not saying this is what will go there.
I think the term to use is scenario.
Right,
Yes.
yes.
All right. I had the same questions.
Okay, I'm just kind of concerned how you're gonna identify or take out a section
Well,
in
and,
between when there's no funding associated with what's gonna go
well,
there.
all right,
to begin with.
let's let Jason get through, because we'll address the funding issue, because the chairman and I talked about that. That there is no funds committed by any approval of this master plan.
Right.
Correct.
What is gonna be identified for number 3 that was taken out?
I'm not going to take it out.
It's just a recommendation from the planning.
It's a recommendation
commission at
from the
this
planning
point.
commission. It has
Okay.
not been removed.
So what is it gonna look like
It's going to look exactly the way it does now.
on page 39?
Everything's going to remain the
Okay.
same. And the reason for that is this was 2 years in the making, and the reason I don't want to take it out, and what I was going to say later, was the fact, this is what the community said they wanted. And the community suggested various options, and so the whole purpose, what's different about every one of these 4 plans is it was not a consultant that came in and did it. It's where you could say, well, that's what the consultant thought should go there. This was a community-driven event, in this particular case, for 2 years, and all of these things were proposed by the community as possibilities to be considered, and so I don't want to remove anything from what the community said that they were interested in looking at. And Jason will tell you that this community was very clear in what they thought.
Right, but if you leave in a community park and trails and all that. You're on private property for one thing.
They are simply possibilities to consider.
It's,
They are not mandating that this board, in a future zoning, which we actually have a zoning coming forward for this
Okay.
property in October, it does not require the board to say, you have to have this or you have to have that. That's the point that the planning commission missed, was the fact that it does not say you have to do those. There was some question because if you look at, for example, the Johnson Ferry study, it has similar things in it that says some possibilities that the community said would be interesting to consider for streetscapes and the way the road was set up if Johnson Ferry was redeveloped. Those by no means required that the county go in that direction. They were just illustrative of what some of the community that participated in the study process said.
I've also heard you say, Commissioner, that you didn't support plans that weren't funded, and that looked as if it was going to obligate funding in some respect. And so to put in trails, I mean, I've seen other proposals brought forward with trails and parks that you are not in support of for the same reason.
This is what this is used for, as a guide for our developers or the community. When the developer comes in, and I'll use an example, in the Johnson Ferry plan, there are pedestrian light designs, there are different other aspects of the Johnson Ferry aesthetic qualities that the community wanted. And so as different variances and zonings have come into the county, we've asked the developers to go look at the plan and include into their plans components that are in there. And so similarly with this, and it's being done in Vinings, there's a trail that the Cumberland CID is going to build that comes directly out of the Vinings Vision Plan. So they're guidelines not for the county to spend money, but for developers in the community, because Vinings, I think, has raised some money to pay for some of the things that were in their master plan.
like the Kent Road guidelines.
Yes.
Yes.
Or Johnson Ferry guidelines.
Yes.
Yes.
But, yeah, they're guidelines, though, they're not
They're
mandatory.
guidelines.
And even when the developer comes in and develops it, we request that they go by the guidelines and put in street lights with the streetlight district and, you know, the decorative street lights and park benches or whatever. But it's not mandatory and it's not funded by the county.
Right. And I think the point that Commissioner was trying to make was that this is in that same vein.
Okay, it's just, I just don't know how you could even put in concept a park and trails on private property.
Well, you can't, but that's why there's multiple, I got confused too for a little while there, and I realized there were just scenarios of proposals of how to possibly use that land. They're just given options. They're not mandated options.
And I will tell you that one of the zoning that's coming forward, that I've seen a preliminary plan, takes some of the components from the study and includes it in the plan that they're bringing forward. Not all of them, but they actually went and looked at this draft and crafted the zoning application that they're bringing forward with in mind what the community said they wanted. Because think about it, when we deal with the zoning, what is the single unknown that a developer has to deal with is what is the community going to support and what they're not going to support. And the whole purpose for all these master plans, all 4 of them, was to give the community a voice to say what they want in their community, instead of a developer just coming in and saying, well, we're going to do this. And then we have, a room with 100 people in it saying, we don't want that. And so this is one of the components that during the creation of the draft plan, which is like the 3rd, well, in this case, it was the 6th public meeting, this was one of the ones where we went back and forth on with whether or not to put in the conceptual plans or not, and the community asked if we would put them in just for illustrative purposes.
Commissioner Gambrell.
Sure, and listening to this conversation, Commissioner Ott, this is kind of like the rezoning we had last month up near SunTrust. I don't remember the name, where they went in and put the lanes in to help with the traffic control up there. So that was something that was kind of voluntary based on the environment that's up there, the situation. So to me, this is just kind of saying, this is how we're envisioning it going. And again, it's optional, but most developers are willing to do that when it helps fix a problem.
Good. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay. I'm almost to the end here. Here's a list and illustration of some of the recommended transportation improvements. Again, speaking of funding, these are not necessarily funded, but they could be considered possibly in future SPLOST, or maybe even as part of some of the discretional items associated with the upcoming SPLOST, like the sidewalk money, for instance. Other grant sources could also be pursued to pursue some of these projects, particularly with the pedestrian safety and the safe routes to school portions as well. Parks, we talked a little bit about that just now in that conversation. Just some of the ideas and overarching concepts regarding parks development, and some of this kind of blends with stormwater, as you see a lot of public facilities these days. Parks facilities, they're double as major stormwater infrastructure pieces as well. Old Fourth Ward Park in Atlanta is one example of a regional illustration of that. Again, stormwater innovative techniques, kind of what I just was referring to. Existing infrastructure, maintaining it, upgrading it, and just educating everyone involved on what impacts downstream could potentially occur from changes in development patterns. And then there's a sense of place piece. I talked a little bit earlier about community identity and sense of pride. That's a big component of this piece. Potential design guidelines creation. We talked about Johnson Ferry during that conversation. Design guidelines were not created as part of this effort, but they could potentially be a future effort that my staff would undertake. The pedestrian light district, underground utilities, and the creation of a stakeholder group or some sort of neighborhood or community association that would kind of be the driver for a lot of these initiatives associated with sense of place. That is the conclusion of the presentation, and as I mentioned at the outset, we're asking for the board to adopt the Johnson Ferry Shallowford Master Plan.
Commissioner Ott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First thing I want to do is thank Jason and his staff. This was the 4th one of these that we did, and probably by far the hardest. And I think some of it was when we did the first one, Powers Ferry, going into it, I think everybody, before we started, knew that the community was interested in a redevelopment plan. On Johnson Ferry, we knew that they were pretty much wanted an aesthetics-related plan. And in Vinings, we knew they wanted a protection plan. we got to Josh, we had no idea what the community was going to want. And as it morphed over time, it actually became more of a protection plan similar to Vinings than it did anything else. And the community was very vocal and very opinionated about what they wanted. A lot of the pictures that Jason has here are ones from the visual preference survey. If you're not familiar, it's as simple as saying park bench A, park bench B, trash can A, trash can B, but all the way to, and something that we had not done before was types of buildings or intensity of a building and the stormwater features you saw. So that's kind of where we had to kind of retool and come back. But one of the things that has been very successful with the other three is the fact that it's real simple for a developer or anyone, even an existing property owner, to come in and redo or rejuvenate their property and know exactly what the community is looking for. Because community support in any kind of development project makes it that much simpler to move it forward. But as Commissioner Gambrell said, and an example, and we don't even have a plan on Windy Ridge, but the very nature of the fact, the conversation that the applicant had with staff and everything, it's like, hey, we could really use this down in the future. And so the applicant added in the extra lane. And so one of the things that we have seen over the course of the now 4 master plans is applicants being much more willing to come in and offer some of those things that the community has said that they wanted, which, kind of works for everyone. And as a result, just drive up and down Powers Ferry Road. Yes, there's a few things that some people were not happy about, but in general, it has worked really well. And a matter of fact, Powers Ferry, the initial one, has already gone through its 5-year plan update. And so, we learned a lot about the community in this discussion. And one of the other things, and we didn't do the 4 plans for this, but with my retirement at the end of the year, and with either one of the 2 candidates that are running, never having been on the Planning Commission, never really being involved in any part of what the board does, they have a lot to learn when they show up. And all 4 of these plans give them a great opportunity to see what that particular community has said they want in their community moving forward. And so it's an invaluable tool for my successor to kind of get a quick lesson on what each one of these 4 communities is looking for as the community grows and prospers and folks stay there. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I make a motion to approve the Johnson Ferry Shallowford small area plan as presented with no changes.
Okay, we have a second. Comments?
Discussion.
Sure.
Why wouldn't you leave 2 and 3 recommendations from the Planning Commission? I don't have a problem with taking out number 3.
My understanding, what are the other ones that they recommended, Jason?
I don't have it in front of me, but I know
It says
that one was, go
The
ahead.
recommendations will remain recommendations. No
Oh,
funding is
all right.
obligated at this time.
Yeah, let me
And the
add.
third one, the next one says, the community can use the recommendations as guidelines for civic groups to establish and implement as they find feasible.
Okay, and my mistake, I was going to add that to the motion. So in the motion to approve the master plan, I want to put in there, whether it be recommendations from the Planning Commission or clerk's notes, that in no way does the plan obligate the county to expend any money towards any of the projects described. They are listed simply as guidelines or potentials for future boards to put into a SPLOST or the community to raise money. But I want to emphasize the fact that it in no way obligates the county to spend any money on those projects.
And I'm sure Commissioner Burrow will second that.
And these are guidelines and
Yes.
and civic associations can use them.
Yeah.
So you're good, you're okay with 2 and 3, just not removing number 3.
Okay. Any other comments, Commissioner Burrow?
No, that's,
Okay, Commissioner Gambrell?
Well, don't we need a second to the amended
we-
motion? I'll be the second to the amended motion.
No, I thought Commissioner Burrow was going to say it's involved no
she
funding.
seconded the first motion, so she has to agree to the.
Oh, okay, all right,
amended
okay.
motion. Correct? Bill?
Actually, after the board is, after the motion's already been seconded, then it becomes the board's motion at that point in time, and you do not have to, the second, whoever made the second does not have to agree to it.
There you go.
There you go. We'll split the vote. We'll split the second. All right, any other comments?
That's why we have
All right,
Bill.
I want to make sure that you attach the video of this hearing to this plan, so we can play it back in future years to buttress what Commissioner Ott said here about, that does not obligate the county to any funding.
We should play it back for future commission meetings where the commissioner doesn't support other master plans.
Okay, so, because I do know there are people out there who will take the wording that's in this master plan, because I too read the master plan.
You're right.
And I had the same issues that she did, but since it's been very clear by the commissioner that this is no intent, it's simply, recommendation for consideration, then I'm fine with it. I'm fine with the motion that's presented. Any other comments? With that, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Passes 5-0. Congratulations, Commissioner Ott. Okay, thank you, Jason.